He mastered the dark arts, split his soul, cheated death. He could bend others to his will, kill with the flick of his wand, and strike fear into the heart of the wizarding world. But for all his power, there was one kind of magic Lord Voldemort could never learn. Not because he lacked talent, he was one of the most gifted wizards of his age. Not because it was too complex, he solved the secrets of Horcruxes after all, but because something inside him was broken. Something human. Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. Today I'm actually going to be addressing a question that was requested in the comment section quite a bit. Was Voldemort able to produce a Patronus? This is a good question, because even though Voldemort was immensely powerful, he wasn't necessarily able to perform every type of magic. In order to delve into this further, I'm first going to explain what a Patronus is. In essence, a Patronus is the result of a witch or wizard casting the Patronus charm. There are two types of Patronus charms, corporeal and incorporeal. The more basic form of the spell is the incorporeal Patronus, which assumes no animal form and simply resembles a burst of white vapor or smoke. The more advanced form of the spell is the conjuring of a corporeal Patronus. The ability to successfully cast a corporeal Patronus is considered an impressive feat in the wizarding community. The corporeal Patronus assumes the form of the witch or wizard's spirit animal, and varies extensively from witch to witch or wizard to wizard. Harry's is a stag, Ron's is a Jack Russell Terrier, and Hermione's is an otter, etc. While casting spells that create your very own spirit animal is probably fun, there is a purpose, and that purpose is to ward off Dementors or Letterfolds, dark creatures that feed on human happiness and incite a feeling of despair in anyone that gets close to them. They are among the foulest creatures around, and represent nothing but darkness, depression, and decay. The Patronus charm is the only known way of dealing with a Dementor, and so it's a gravely important thing for a witch or wizard to know. The Patronus represents everything that a Dementor doesn't: hope, happiness, survival, and purity. As the Patronus itself does not feel despair or hopelessness as a human might, the Dementors can't hurt it and are repelled by its presence. Which brings me to Voldemort. Surely a wizard as powerful as him, with seemingly endless magical capabilities, was able to conjure a Patronus. Surely the Dark Lord himself would have been able to handle a couple of Dementors. This is where you may be surprised. The successful casting of a Patronus is not only reliant on magical ability, but also love and happiness, things that he has no concept of. Voldemort was doomed from the start, and by far his biggest flaw as a person is the way that he was unable to feel love. It was the fuel for the fire that set Voldemort off on his path of villainy. I really wonder what type of man he would have become if he was simply able to understand emotion or the concept of love. He was truly destined for evil, and had no escape. Voldemort is just as dark and evil as a Dementor, and so it makes sense that he would not be able to produce something that could combat them. Voldemort's only joy came from doing terrible things. He was never happy, even in childhood, and never got to experience true love or happiness, leaving him with no concept of either. This is perfectly depicted in a quote from Dumbledore in a discussion with Harry. If there is one thing Voldemort cannot understand, it is love. He didn't realize that love as powerful as your mother's for you leaves its own mark. When J.K. Rowling was asked if Snape was the only Death Eater who could successfully produce a Patronus, she responded, yes, because a Patronus is used against things that the Death Eaters generally generate or fight alongside. They would not need Patronuses. Voldemort and other dark witches and wizards saw no use for the spell because they were entirely desensitized to dark creatures and dark things. The spell was simply not something that made any sense for them to use or learn. It would not help them. So dark wizards see no use for casting a Patronus. But what happens if they actually try to do it? What happens if they try to cast the spell? There is actually a tale of a dark wizard called Rixidian that attempted this very thing. In the tale, it stated that Rixidian hastily tried to cast the spell, failing to remember that only the pure of heart can produce a Patronus. He was the first wizard in history to try it, and while he was an accomplished wizard, it did not end well for him. After casting the spell, it is stated that maggots shot out of his wand, which quickly devoured him as they engulfed his body. So it's pretty safe to say that Voldemort couldn't and wouldn't ever have been able to produce a Patronus. But if he did somehow cast a Patronus, if he could somehow understand love, even if only briefly, then what form would his Patronus take? We know that the form of Patronuses are uniquely tied to each witch and wizard that cast them. When initially casting the corporeal Patronus, the witch or wizard will have no idea what animal they're conjuring until they've done it for the first time. There is no explanation for how a certain Patronus animal is tied to a witch or wizard. It is speculated that the shape of the Patronus produced is significantly influenced by the personality of the caster, and so when we see characters with the same Patronus, Harry and his father, Snape and Lily Potter, we can infer that they had similar personality types. It's also worth noting that the corporeal Patronus of a wizard can actually change according to life events. The Patronus is recognized as an extension of the identity of a witch or wizard, which means that in many cases you will know who is trying to contact you through their Patronus alone. So, what was Voldemort's Patronus? Surely it must have been something very powerful and evil, something that could complement his nature. It turns out that a Patronus can actually be almost anything, and the limits are fairly undefined. This is supported with the following information from Pottermore. No reliable system for predicting the form of an individual's Patronus has ever been found, although the great 18th century researcher of charms, Professor Catalyst Spangle, set forth certain principles that are widely accepted as true. The Patronus, asserted Spangle, represents that which is hidden, unknown but necessary within the personality. Here, says Spangle, is the explanation for the appearance of Patronuses in forms that their casters might not expect, for which they have never felt a particular affinity, or, in rare cases, even recognize. It is usual, but not inevitable, for a Patronus to take the form of an animal commonly found in the caster's native country. Given their long affinity with humans, it is perhaps unsurprising that among the most common Patronuses, although it must be remembered that any corporeal Patronus is highly unusual, are dogs, cats, and horses. Extinct Patronuses are very rare, but not unknown. Strangely, given their long connection with wizard kind, owl Patronuses are unusual. Most uncommon of all possible Patronuses are magical creatures such as dragons, thestrals, and phoenixes. While a rare and magical Patronus undoubtedly reflects an unusual personality, it does not follow that it is more powerful or will enjoy greater success at defending its caster. I'd like to think that Voldemort's Patronus animal would be a snake, as this would be a reflection of Voldemort's relationship with his companion, Nagini. Nagini in snake form was first introduced in The Goblet of Fire, where she is described as eating the body of Muggle Frank Bryce. Though we don't have an exact date, it's speculated that Nagini and Voldemort met in the forests of Albania sometime in the 1980s. At this point, Nagini would have likely fully assumed her snake-like form, and Voldemort would have been hiding in his disembodied state. It's hard to say how their initial reaction would have gone, but we know a couple of things about Voldemort that would help him in interacting with a giant snake. First, Voldemort is able to possess animals, and we know that later on in the films and books he can possess Nagini, so I would imagine that possession was part of their original interaction. Secondly, Voldemort is the descendant of Salazar Slytherin. This means that his connection to snakes is strong, and that he can communicate with them because of his ability to speak Parseltongue. If we are supposed to be immediately recognized by our Patronuses, then it would make sense that Voldemort's Patronus would be a snake like Nagini, as the two are commonly associated with one another. Additionally, Nagini was perhaps the only person that Voldemort ever seemed to show some level of genuine affection toward. Dumbledore had this to say of Voldemort's relationship with Nagini. I think he is perhaps as fond of her as he can be of anything. He certainly likes to keep her close and has an unusual amount of control over her, even for a Parselmouth. Alternatively, I think that Voldemort's Patronus could be something completely over the top, highly physically intimidating and very unique. Something like a basilisk. As we know from the Chamber of Secrets, the gigantic basilisk, aka the Serpent of Slytherin, was a creature placed inside of the chamber by Salazar himself, one of the four founders of Hogwarts. The basilisk was originally placed there to purify the school of all Muggleborns, and could only be controlled by the rightful heir of Slytherin, who we know to be Tom Riddle. Though Harry could speak to the basilisk with Parseltongue, he had no control over it. Throughout the Chamber of Secrets, we see Hogwarts students dropping off like flies. This is because the basilisk is loose from the Chamber of Secrets. When these students were found, they were in a petrified state. To be petrified means that you're basically turned to stone. You are completely immobile and unresponsive. Something as immense and intimidating as a basilisk just seems fitting as a Patronus for Voldemort. However, we have to remember that Voldemort would never be able to produce a Patronus, as he does not possess the capacity to feel love. What do you guys think? what would Voldemort's Patronus be? Let me know down in the comment section below. And that's it for this video. If you enjoy the content, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, remember, it does not do to dwell on dreams and to forget to live.